Thanks so much, John, and of course, thanks to you and Amanda for your fantastic leadership. So we have three great panelists today to share insights about how we move forward at the intersection of technology and education. We've got with us Tiffany Anderson, who's been a public school educator for over 26 years. She serves now as the first African-American woman to be superintendent of the Topeka Public Schools, and we all know the importance of Topeka's history tied to Brown versus Board of Education. And Dr. Anderson has been recognized for her leadership as Ed Week 16 Leaders to Learn From winner. We've got with us Dr. Don Haddad, who served in education for 36 years. He was selected as superintendent of schools for the St. Vrain Valley School District in 2009. He's been honored as a Superintendent of the Year in 2013 by the National Association of School Superintendents. And we've got with us Becky Pringle, who is the NEA president. She began her career as a middle school science teacher, spent 31 years in the classroom. And I know Becky as a tenacious advocate for equity. Her deep commitment to educational justice I've gotten to see firsthand in our work together when I was secretary and our work together since. So I'm thrilled to be a part of this panel and to be able to help prompt some discussion here. I want to start with Becky. I know, Becky, in your role at the NEA, you have been fighting for a long time for closing the digital divide. The NEA has been a key leader along with EdTrust and other organizations in the Homework Gap Coalition. It'd be helpful to know, as you think about this moment, certainly the impact of COVID, the broader national conversation about racial justice, why has the NEA prioritized the homework gap and the digital divide? Do you think we're making progress, and what do we need to do from here?
So good afternoon, John. It's so good to see you and to be with you again for this important discussion. I want to start by just congratulating all of this year's award winners, especially our educators who during this extraordinary time just stepped up. You heard Randy talk about all that they've done as they took care of other people's children. They didn't just teach them, they nurtured them. They made sure that they had what they needed so they could learn. So I just wanted to say congratulations to the award winners and thank you, of course, and John and Amanda for your leadership of NCTED. So you're right, John. This is an issue we've been talking about forever. And here we are, right? We actually named it the homework gap because at the time, as you very well know, we knew that we were sending students home to do additional research, to expand their learning time and opportunities. We knew that there were many students who went home with homework, and as the years went on, it grew to almost 70%. John, of the homework that they were getting required some connectivity or digital tools to actually really dig into it. And so we've known for quite a while that there was a gap. We knew that our students who had been living in poverty or our students in remote locations, we certainly knew that our Black and Brown and Indigenous students were far more likely to suffer from this gap. And so we sounded that alarm. So John, ironically, it was the end of February when NEA actually convened this group, 60 organizations, largely education stakeholder organizations, which but also others, because we knew that other people who had access to our elected officials, who had access to organizations, philanthropy, all of those kinds of folks needed to gather together in one space. And we needed to show that we had the will to actually do something about this issue. And that happened at the end of February. John, we, even within legislation, we've coined the term homework gap. But that doesn't quite fit right now, does it? It's more than homework. It's all the school work that our students are doing right now. We hoped to soon just be calling it the homework gap, but we know that the learning of our students goes on beyond the time when they're in the confines of our classroom, which we hope will be so soon now that we have a new president. And we know that this is an issue, not just for our students, honestly, John, you know that. This is an issue for our parents and our communities. It's an issue for educators, which, by the way, a lot of people didn't know that educators themselves didn't necessarily have access to the digital tools they needed or the connectivity, particularly in rural areas.
Thanks so much, Becky, and just thanks again for your just devotion to this issue and commitment of the NEA to this issue. I want to turn to our superintendents. Dr. Anderson, I'm hoping you could speak to the support that teachers need. I mean, let's assume that folks are able to get online themselves and their kids are able to get online. Everybody has devices. We know we're not there yet, but even with that, even when device access and internet access problems are solved, we know that professional development is not always available. There are real disparities in terms of the resources that districts have to support their teachers. When I was secretary, we worked on the National Ed Tech Plan, and one of the things the National Ed Tech Plan lays out is that teachers need training and ongoing support around online and blended learning, but we know that isn't always happening. How have you tackled that in Topeka? How have you thought about supporting your teachers around virtual learning?
Well, that question, first of all, thank you for that. It's really multifaceted. Let me first start with saying for Becky Pringle, it is wonderful to be on this screen with another woman leader who is really making changes and putting forward the voice of many teachers. And so I'll talk about this teacher piece in terms of levels. Most people who know me, they know that I always wear a scarf and I wear tennis shoes. And this one, it says Women Unite. I don't think you can see it fully, but one of my wonderful educators gave me that. And it shows people lifting each other up. And that's really why I wear this one today. It shows people lifting each other up, not just because our first woman vice president is now elected, but also because we can't do this alone. And so in order to prepare teachers, it's one thing to say technology informed, but we have to be technology equipped. Just like trauma informed, you have to be trauma equipped. And so I love listening to all of the award recipients, and congratulations to them. We use many of those tools, but we have to understand that having the tool doesn't mean you know how to use it. Most colleges today don't have courses on how do you use technology if you don't have broadband at home. How do you use it if you're a rural teacher? What are the various items that you can use in higher education to connect with students virtually? We know that when the pandemic ends, we will still have some students that are learning remotely and virtually, and just some new things that have occurred. When we talk about those students in the schools that have closed, let's make sure we know who we're talking about. We have 124,000 U.S. public and private schools closed a year and a half ago in March. 124,000. And so that means that's about 5.5 million students. Wow. When you think about the fact that over 50% of the students are in poverty, and you know that there's a strong correlation between access to Wi-Fi and broadband and the students in poverty, then now we know we have a lot of students at a disadvantage. So this is about access and equity, but not just students, teachers. We quickly learn in Topeka. We've been one-to-one technology since I've been here. Pre-K through 12, every student has a device. That has continued to grow over my 5 years here. And so when I first started, pre-K and 2 didn't have their own devices. They did as of a year ago. And so with that piece in mind, what I quickly learned is some teachers didn't have devices. Teachers lived in rural areas. There's not broadband in this area. So even if they had a device, without broadband, they can't connect. So let's talk about development and how we make sure that people are developed. And I'll just give some strategies. Now, our Twitter at TPS_501, I've asked staff to just put research articles there. I want everyone to leave here today with some resources that they can do today. Kids are counting on this today. They don't have time to wait for tomorrow or next month. And so some of the staff development is making sure that all of our teachers, not only with their devices, they have some visual models. And so we have some teachers that are quite savvy that we call them model classrooms that we put on video. We put them on the television station. We've partnered with other agencies to ensure that teachers are literally modeling a lesson with students there and showing how to utilize the technology. We quickly changed our staff development that even though we could have them in person, instead we had them use webinars. We had them use Google Classroom. We had them use the technology that we're going to use with our students. You see, at the end of the day, Dr. King and Ms. Pringle, we're all teachers. Our title just happens to be something different, right? And so for all teachers, that we must use the resources that we're asking our teachers to use with students. You should know how to screencastify. You should know how to use Seesaw. You should know how to use Khan Academy. You should know how to use those resources. So we began using all of those resources for our own staff development. That's one key piece. So right now, we actually, in Topeka Public Schools, do not allow for group meetings in person. And so instead, they all have to be technologically done. That will almost force you as an administrator, myself, principals, to learn that piece. The other pieces, and I don't want to gloss over, I know you have several questions, but I'm just going to mention two other real key pieces. When you talk about infrastructure, you talk about funding. It is, I think, shameful that in Title IV, for a district our size, we're one of the largest in Kansas, we only get about $160,000. We're talking 14,000 kids. $160,000 in Title IV to utilize. And even with that $160,000, the flexibility is not there. 20% has to be in STEM, 15% has to be, can be used in technology, and that's it. Okay, so outside of that, now we're looking at what can we use over and beyond in Title I? What can we use in our ESSER funding? But that's the reality for everyone that is on this screen. So don't assume that we have, a lot of funds to support that. And we are hopeful that in the future, there will be high priority on funding so that teachers can adequately do the work that we're asking them to do with the resources available to close this gap.
To your point about equity and a systems approach, we had to bring the curriculum department, the instruction department, the technology department, our operations and maintenance team. We had to move them from being separate entities to being a systemic approach, and they all came into one department. And we established our learning tech team. The onset, we developed a learning tech plan that we actually were recognized by some pretty large organizations, ISTE and otherwise. It was an incredible lift by our team, and it was one where we started, we piloted, we implemented with iPads across the board, K through 12, and we also made sure that we had our bandwidth built out. Right now in our system, we can have all of our teachers, all of our students, everyone online at the same time, and really only use about 40 to 50% of our bandwidth infrastructure. But that was also by design. We had to establish that before we moved forward. And then we aligned our budget to our priorities. And I think this is something that's really important. If you're going to sustain these efforts long term, you have to make sure that you restructure your finances to ensure the stability and the strong foundation. And we were able to do that. And that's not always easy because you buck up against some long-term investments that people are really invested in. And you have to help them understand as a community why we're making these changes. We next had to make sure systemically, we have 60 schools in our district, and we had to make sure that there was equity in the experience. And so we had to align the standards with the curriculum, with the instruction, with the assessment, with the materials and the professional development. And we accessed the support of many businesses and corporate advisors to sit on advisory boards to help us develop the curriculum. We also knew that this would not be effective if our teachers weren't really skilled in the use of technology, the instructional use of technology. And so we developed a long-term digital learning collaborative where before these devices were rolled out, all of our teachers engaged in pretty extensive professional development, large-scale, weekly, monthly, and then we also put instructional tech coaches in each of the schools or most of the schools so that the professional development was happening on a daily basis. Another really key point in doing something like this is you have to understand, I believe, how much standardized testing has impeded our ability to provide this type of an education that's consistent with the needs of the 21st century. I do believe that standardized testing has a place in our public education system, but I also think it has derailed and caused us to not be able to focus as much on the creativity, the analytical thinking, the innovation, the problem solving, the communication skills, all of the things that our children need. And so I think we need to find that balance. And we made a commitment to doing that in St. Vrain, which was really important. We found in work with our corporate priorities, and we had some of the largest corporations in the world on our teams with IBM and Apple and a whole host of others, that their priorities for the workforce were not necessarily consistent with what the testing priorities were yielding for our students. And so we had to find that balance, because what we ultimately wanted to do was provide a strong competitive advantage for our children. And we knew that if we limited the learning experience to a test, that we wouldn't be able to give them that strong competitive advantage. And then we built our system out from pre-K all the way through 14. Yeah. So
I love that Dr. Haddock mentioned that. Dr. King, may I jump on in and just add to that?
Please.
Piece there. So we just really have this conversation back and forth, but I will share with you, it's interesting, a lot of the things that he shared, and you talk about supporting students. Here's the thing, programs come and go. They come and go with the money, they come and go with the leader, systems remain. And so much like Dr. Haddock mentioned, we have a tech person in every school. When we went out, we were already K-12, pre-K through 12, one-to-one, so kids could take their computer home. Broadband is still an issue, but it then caused us to take the map that we already use, where you see the poverty rates and you see where's Wi-Fi. It caused us to do some of those kinds of things. It's wonderful. We just came off of Martin Luther King holiday and birthday, and one of the things that he says is that we're interconnected. No man can be an island on his own. We're all interconnected. And so as Dr. Haddock really talked about those systems being in place using several of the resources within your community, it does require, if you haven't started already and you're listening to this program, doing that needs assessment. We, like Dr. Haddock's district, we had a bond that gave us the one-to-one technology. That was well before I started. So I came in and they were already having one-to-one technology. I got the chance to see the pre-K through 12. We have preschool in every school. Here's one of the pieces that we have in place right now. Right in the middle of a housing project, there were preschools already that we established in partnership with the housing units. They cleared out some housing units, put in place preschool. That's where families can come and get internet access if they need it. It's right in the middle of a housing project. So critical things like that in terms of partnering in some key ways. But this piece of systemically, how are you going to assess students? Push aside the standardized. It's the standardized test, whether you're taking the ACT, CAP, MAP, whatever it is, it gives you a score to gain entry into something. It doesn't tell you who you are. It doesn't holistically serve you. It gives you that score that sometimes allows people to label and categorize and place you. What we look for systemically is, how do you teach teachers and students how to think and how to develop and how to grow? Here's an example of that. Much like what he shared, we have a place called TCALC. It's an innovation center for career and college preparation, and it opened in the last several years. Our current students are actually managing the website for hundreds of businesses as part of their curriculum. So the business doesn't have to pay anybody. They manage it, they grow it, they develop it, they do the coding for it. That's real-time learning. That's a system. That's not a program. It doesn't cost us anything to do it. And so partnering, again, if you're someone, because I don't just want to say, here's what Topeka's doing, but here's what Topeka's doing, but here's what's replicable that you can do. If you're starting from a place of not having anything in place, get your partners. Make sure that you don't leave out your teachers. So not only do they need to be at the table, but understanding that they also have to be equipped and ready to close some of these gaps. And then this key component that we often forget to talk about are training our families. So we have training centers all throughout. And I get so tired when I hear people talk about parent conferences between 9 and 5. Why can't you have parent conferences at the laundromat, at the grocery store? Why can't you set up little incubators, which some cities have done? If you look at Boston, if you look at several places on the East Coast in particular, and certainly in Topeka, little incubator labs where you have Wi-Fi portable areas. Teachers can have parent conferences. So I'll stop there and cede the floor just back to you, Dr. King. But, Dr. Haddock really mentioned some key points on systems. Systems remain, programs come and go. If you leave with nothing else, remember that piece.
You know, and to your point, I'll tell you the crux of this, it all does come back to your teachers and the quality of your teachers in the classroom. And what we've found is our teachers love that balance of autonomy plus the support of a systemic approach. And so the two of those things going hand in hand are absolutely critical. Absolutely. So thank you.
So,
Well, I know we're coming up on time, so I'm gonna let you close us out. I'm gonna let you close us out, Becky.
I gotta get in on this because you know what, Dr. Anderson, you know what? I need to call you Tiffany and Don. We need to take this show on the road, John, because I'm telling you, can you just hear my heart singing, listening to you speak the truth? And the people who are listening, and I know Nick Tech has focused this panel on the technology, but I have to point out the things that have been raised up, the systems approach, that we can't just talk about the technology. We have to talk about and think about our students as that whole student, how we all have to share the responsibility so that when we say every, we mean every. And when we talk, we can't just talk about technology. We've got to talk about everything that impacts our students' ability to learn. I'm telling you, I wrote down notes, John. I wrote, Don, I'm telling you, Tiffany, I wrote it down, what you said. I'm going to be calling you because you are amazing. Standardized testing get in the way of actually focusing on those 21st century skills. Yes, we will be talking about preschool all the way through. We will be talking, and I need the two of you to join me in leading a movement to reclaim public education as the foundation of this democracy, as a common good that it is, and then transform it into something it was never designed to be. And that is a racially and socially just and equitable system that prepares every student, every single one, to succeed in a diverse and interdependent world, to live into their brilliance. Thank you so very much. You two made my day.